Okay, so it's time to dwell into another Atari 2600 classic crapped out by Activision, back in the day when crapping out classics was a term of endearment. Today's victim, shall we say, is Keystone Kapers, and this is a game that I recall playing back in the late 1980s. I believe a friend of mine or a cousin had this game. I don't recall that part, but I do recall the part where I played Keystone Kapers and enjoyed the heck out of it, because it was a fun little game that was fun to play. Playing this years later, I still think this is a fun little game, but let's dwell into this a bit deeper, shall we? So Keystone Kapers is a fairly simple game in concept, as you assume the role of Keystone Kelly, a policeman charged with the duty of apprehending fleeing criminal Harry Hooligan. Harry Hooligan has robbed the shopping center of various items, and in an attempt to slow you down, left some of these items behind, whether they be bouncing balls, radios, or toy airplanes. Colliding with any of these items will take seconds away from your timer, although such items such as the planes will kill you outright and cost you a life. You'll also lose a life if you fail to arrest Harry Hooligan before he escapes or time expires. Right off the bat, you could tell that Keystone Kapers is a game that's fairly simple in concept, but manages to pull it off with a game that keeps things moving at all times. There's always something going on screen at all times. As you progress further, they add in more stuff to throw you off. I like the inclusion of elevators, as they can be used to get to floors faster, but you could also use them to stage ambushes if you're willing to wait it out. Time it right and you could catch Harry off guard and go for the easy arrest, but jump in too early and Harry will somehow know to run away from you. A particular annoyance on a high floor, because he could go down on the escalators while you cannot, and this will result in time lost and you only have less than a minute to catch the guy. So this gives you a couple ways of getting to Harry and ultimately varies up the gameplay a bit in Keystone Kapers. Some people will take the shortcut with the elevators, others will take the long way and tough it out with the various obstacles, but all who play will find their way to catch the crook and start the whole process all over again. In terms of control in Keystone Kapers, it's fairly simple and fairly functional. You could run, jump, duck, and all of these abilities are very easy to pull off. That in itself probably goes without saying, and a game's ability to efficiently execute the most basic of character functions is probably not something to give high praise for, but I've seen games on later consoles screw up these very basic concepts with either poor control or ill-conceived execution, especially when these games rely on precision control to be played competently, let alone efficiently. So to say that Keystone Kapers manages good overall control is worth mentioning, since precision jumping and ducking are necessary abilities to survive in Keystone Kapers, and thankfully they work out pretty good here. No complaints. Keystone Kapers sports some pretty decent looking graphics. While the backdrops are rather plain looking with its solid colors, the various items such as carts and escalators are fairly distinguishable, and I sort of like the gradient effect on the cityscape, sort of like a sunset effect. It's a particularly nice touch. But the character sprites of Keystone Kelly and Harry Hooligan are the true high points of Keystone Kapers, looking fairly detailed and animating rather smoothly. There's an almost advanced quality to the work done on these characters that, maybe if smoothed out a little bit, could have fit in with something off an NES launch title. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch saying that perhaps, but they genuinely look impressive given the hardware they had to work with at the time. I mean, they really look good, and it sort of shows that given the effort you could put out some really good stuff with the VCS hardware. I'm just saying, you know. In terms of sound, Keystone Kapers is pretty minimal in that regard. You have footstep sounds that sound decent, a jumping sound effect, a collision effect, and a couple others. They sound pretty decent. There's not really much more to say in that regard. It's not the most memorable collection of sound effects to come out of the VCS hardware, but they serve their purpose and they're not annoying. As far as I'm concerned, that's just fine. Overall, Keystone Kapers is another fine Atari 2600 gem from Activision. What it generally lacks in variety, it makes up for with deceptively addictive gameplay and loads of fun. Definitely one worth checking out if you haven't already. Good stuff.